Well, hello, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us here at BSides Toronto. I'm very excited to be here. And today we're going to be discussing cybersecurity's new silver bullets, privacy, and insurance. I'm Chinmayee Paunikar, and I will be moderating this discussion. I'm a cybersecurity operations manager at Fractional CISO. I help companies kickstart and manage their cybersecurity programs and also help them achieve their security and compliance goals. I have a wonderful panel here with us, Ken Rayner and Alan McDermott. Ken is an insurance industry veteran, and he actually graduated from Ryerson and jumped right into insurance. He retired, but cybersecurity really intrigued him, so he's back in insurance, doing cybersecurity insurance now. And Alan, can you give us a quick introduction?
Sure. So first off, I just want to acknowledge Kat Kood, who's supposed to be the privacy expert, was not able to make it. She had some family emergencies she had to attend to. So I'll do my best to speak. I've got some privacy background, not her level of expertise, but hopefully he can provide some context. I've been doing security for about 20 years now in various roles. I was in charge of security at Economical Insurance, Equitable Life. I've worked at BlackBerry in security and a few other places. So I've seen a breadth of things. And really excited to be here.
Thank you so much. So I guess I'll start my first question with you, Alan. What are some of the challenges that security teams are facing when it comes to getting funding or resources or just even approval for their projects?
Absolutely. So this can be a frustrating thing for most cybersecurity professionals because it's so blindingly obvious that something needs to be done. The problem, of course, is that a lot of the people who are not in that world, they really struggle to understand. They don't have that depth of knowledge, and they've got different focuses. A lot of the times when you're in front of business leaders, they're in their mind, they're trying to allocate funds, money to maybe a marketing project or something that's going to bring in money compared to your project, which is going to cost money. Potentially save if it prevents stuff, but it's very hard to show that. It's kind of like an asteroid didn't hit me. That's great, but how do we know, did something prevent that or not? So what happens is that there needs to be sort of that connection. And a lot of the times, the challenge is how to make that into business terms, things that they care about, quantifying the risk, which is why insurance could be a brilliant thing. It's really about presenting to your audience and making them see the value in what you're doing. So the big challenge really is communication and changing the terms and saying it in the version that they understand and know.
Honestly, it should just be like you ask them if you read the news, and that should be reason enough to invest in these things, right? Well, speaking of cyber insurance, Ken, can you give us a brief history? It's a new thing and it's maturing, so let's start with a little history there.
Okay, that'd be my pleasure. I did graduate from Ryerson in 1969, which most of you probably weren't even born then. But and this is all new to me, but the one thing that I was very pleased to see hasn't changed was my homeroom is still here. The Imperial Pub is still working, is still there. So I'm very happy to see that. Anyway, yes, I think before we get into changes that's happening in cyber, of course, everyone knows rates are going up and everything, but I'll give you a little history as to why. Of course, insurance is based on history and actuarial facts. They gather data as to why claims occur, where do they occur. If you could take auto, for example, young drivers are more prone to have accidents than older, mature drivers, so they have higher rates and everything like that. So they get all the numbers, they get all the data, they give them to a bunch of actuaries who, oh, by the way, there are no actuaries in the crowd, are there? Okay, good. So the difference between an actuary and an accountant is the accountant actually looks at your shoes when he's talking to you. Anyway, I just thought I'd throw that in there. So they get all this data, they crunch the numbers, and they come up with what they think is the right rate. And then every insurance company massages that, either increases it, decreases it, adds deductibles, different qualifications for insurance. Then cyber came along, and no one knew anything about cyber. Well, how do you really properly underwrite cyber when you have no history as to what you're expecting? Warren Buffett, who's one of the smartest men in the world, said, none of my companies will be insuring cyber for the simple fact we don't know what we're doing. So you have a bunch of companies are kind of dazzled by the dollars, big dollars in cyber insurance and getting bigger all the time because the rates keep going up. And they got into it, and I don't want to say blind because if there's any cyber underwriters in here, I apologize. But really they didn't have a historical data to fall back on. We came up through the ranks of insurance. We sat at the knee of the great wise property underwriter who said, you know, this is what you look for, this is what you do, this is how you rate it, this is how you communicate what you're trying to do. Where cyber had none of that. Cyber was just, let's go get these premiums, let's write as much as we can. So of course, the inevitable happened. They had a lot of losses. I mean, you have to remember, you're dealing with career criminals whose only purpose in life is to hack your data and capture your data and then use it to ransom you for ransomware and to get money back from you. It's like trying to insure a building for fire insurance, and there's a whole industry out there dedicated to setting it on fire. It's basically the same thing. And these are not nice people, and they're not stupid people, and they really spend 24 hours a day trying to crack into your data and hack your information that you've got and you're holding for your customers. So to ensure that is a challenge. One of the largest insurance companies that write cyber have a one question application. It's like, what is your protection? What is your software to protect from being hacked by hackers? I mean, that's like asking a property insurer, do you have a fire extinguisher? Well, yeah, I do, but it doesn't mean it works, and it doesn't mean that it's in the right location. It doesn't mean there's a lot of other things that can go wrong. So to actually write a lot of business based on not the right questions and not the right, or not the right answers, I guess, is very difficult. So the premium started out at this level, and then they suffered a lot of losses, mostly ransomware. And ransomware is, it's a scourge, really. It's putting businesses out of business. 60% of small to medium businesses that are hacked go out of business within 6 months. That's a staggering statistic. 60% of businesses that are hacked are out of business in 6 months. Not the large ones, not Rogers, wink, wink. That was a, you know, that wasn't a cyber attack. That was a malfunction on some of their equipment. But they'll probably, you know, have to put in more stringent defenses against that sort of thing. But I mean, your problem basically is your employees. People open up malware not knowing it. They get an email from Walmart saying they've got a $100 gift certificate and just have to go in there and open it, and bang, they're in. So it's an extremely, extremely difficult class of business to underwrite. You can put all the detect and defend type of software that you can find in front of the problem, but they always get through. I mean, the Department of Defense in the US was hacked. Target in the US, the big ones. I mean, there's nothing you can really, well, there is some things you can do to prevent it, but they're not totally effective. Nothing's 100% effective. So the rates started out here, and then they increased last year, and 2 years ago. They're up between 300% and 400% from what they were 3 years ago, cyber insurance, if you can get it. So the trend is, and I think that was the question, and I got a little bit carried away, sorry. But the question was, what can you expect next year or in the future for cyber insurance? You can expect it to be getting much more difficult to get. You can expect it to cost you a lot more money. And you can expect that there'll be a lot of requirements that you'll have to have at your business in order to qualify for it. You're going to have to put in multiple factor authentication. Right now, a lot of companies don't have that. They could just use a password to go in. But like all the new phones now, you've got thumbprint, eye retina identification, password, all that sort of thing. And you're going to need that in your business as well, otherwise you won't get it. The companies just are losing too much money, so they won't insure it unless you have MFA. And we're famous for three-letter acronyms, but multi-factor authentication is going to be mandatory probably next year. The rates are going to go up again, but probably not to the extent that they were up last year or the year before. I think it's starting to level off. I talked to a few insurance companies before I came here today to find out what their plan was for next year on renewal. And they are looking for rate increases, but they're more concerned about making sure that you've got the protection at your end to make sure you don't get hacked. And there's a company called New Shield. Sorry, a shameless plug. It's a company that I work with, but they have discovered created a layer of protection that protects your data. Like, and none of you remember this, but we used to have overhead projectors. We didn't have these things, but it's like you put that acetate on the overhead and write on it. And that's basically what New Shield does. It covers up your data so that the hacker thinks he's got your data, but basically he's got the acetate on top of it, and it's peeled off, your data remains untouched. Something like that is going to be mandatory from insurance companies to make sure that they can get their data back without having to pay the ransomware. And I think that's probably my 5 minutes for now.
Maybe some legislation would help too.
Sorry?
Maybe some legislation on this front would help too.
Yes, for sure. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
And speaking of legislation, actually, what's happening with the privacy legislation? Because we know that California is following the EU with CCPA, and they really seem to be serious about it. And we also have PIPEDA, where in theory it looks like it has teeth too. So what kind of changes are coming, Alan? And what should Canadian businesses expect?
Absolutely. So similar to cybersecurity. So my first question, which I forgot to maybe speak to, was a forcing function. So it's something to help the cybersecurity professional say, hey, here's a business reason to do something beyond some technical mumbo jumbo that they see. The reality is, so cyber insurance is going to be a forcing function. The other is privacy legislation. So what's happening is they're really starting to see basically companies, there's no money to be made by enforcing privacy. So it's going to be legislated, it's going to be forced. A lot like seatbelts or something like that, is to protect the businesses and the people that work with them. So what's happened is that GDPR, so that's the EU's data privacy laws, really do have some teeth. Like they require if there's a breach, you have to notify them within 72 hours. They do hand out fines. Amazon was fined over $800 million. So that's going to make people sit up and take notice. CCPA, which is California's Consumer Protection Act, has actually just handed out a fine to Sephora for $1.2 million. So it's really starting to be much more prescriptive. Historically, it was very hand-wavy. Hey, you should probably let us know if you think there was something that may have happened. And then what happened is the lawyers got involved. They said, no, nothing to see here. Never really happened. But what they're being is prescriptive to say, okay, here's the criteria, here's the data. If anything happens, you need to tell us when. And if you don't, there's going to be repercussions. So to Chinmayee's point about PIPEDA, or PIPEDA, I never know which one, it was very watered down. Like it was an older one, it was 20 years old, and it was similar to that. So what's happened is they now have introduced a thing called Bill C-27, which is going to have two big functions to it. One's the consumer protection side, and another one has to do with AI, which I thought was kind of brilliant. So the consumer protection part is similar to GDPR or CCPA, which says, here's the criteria, and if you as a business don't follow this, there can be repercussions. On the AI side, what they're saying is because of the nature of AI, there's the big black box, right? You'd have data in, magic, data out. So what they're saying is they don't care about the black box, the magic. If at the end of that, it can hurt or be detrimental to an individual in terms of privacy, you can get nailed on that too. So that's already past first reading, and that's what's coming. So from a business standpoint, if you're a cybersecurity professional, this is something you're going to be able to point to and say, okay, you've got your opinions, there may not be business sense, I get it, we're going to have to do this. So this is definitely something to keep an eye on.
That's awesome, thank you. And
sorry, one last one. If you're doing business in the US, so the US privacy legislation has been, in my opinion, a bit of a disaster. It's very messy state to state. They're about to pass legislation at a federal level that would override that. Well, there's debates on how exactly it's going to be implemented, but they're thinking big picture, which would then be another very important piece in that puzzle. Sorry.
so on the fines and stuff, would insurance help cover that? Because, well, insurance would pay for the lawyers and stuff, but the fine is something I can see the insurance companies just saying, no, we're not going to do this. And actually, that brings me to another important question, which is, do businesses or people who don't work in insurance really even understand how to leverage their cyber insurance? Like, how much coverage do I need? Or is it going to be enough? And when to pull in the cyber company, the insurance company? Could
Well, probably the majority don't, but that's why you really need a good insurance broker who knows his cyber and can put you with the right companies that will give you the right coverage for your particular business. And you should probably, and well, you shouldn't, but if you have an IT department, you know, that's great. But if you're too small to have your own IT department, you'd have to go to an MSP, which is a managing service provider. And there's several of those around that would look after all that stuff for you. And they'd make sure you've got the right coverage. They'll monitor it. Like if you're going to install multi-factor authentication, they'll install that for you. They'll manage it for you. They'll make sure everyone is trained in it properly, that sort of thing. So to do it on your own is a bit of a challenge, unless you're like a two-man office. But even then, I think that, sorry, two-person office. But even then, you should probably get an MSP to look after your cyber. It's hugely important. It could ruin your business. It could put you out of business. And remember that there's like a lot of companies say, well, it'll never happen to me. I mean, I'm a small little company. Who would really care about me? But they're the kind that they go after because the software you've got protecting your data is not as robust as the larger companies. So it's an easy mark for you, for them. And the other thing is that 40% of businesses that have been hacked and paid the ransom get hacked again within 6 months. My recommendation is you don't pay it. You contact your insurance company, let them deal with it. They've got professionals as well that know how to deal with these guys and can negotiate the price. If you pay it on your own and then go to your insurance company, and they might deny it because they're going to say, you didn't alert us. You have to tell them as soon as you know that your data has been compromised, you have to let them know. That's part of the contract. So they can take over, they can manage the claim. And nobody wants a claim, trust me. It doesn't matter if you've got insurance or not, and if nobody wants to go through that. Your business is going to be down for, well, I think the average now is about 12 to 14 days to get your data back. Even if you've got backup servers to roll it back, it's still going to take a long time. So you don't want to claim. You want to make sure that you do everything you can to make sure that doesn't happen. And getting a professional broker and professional MSP is the key to that. So.
Thank you. So based on the insights that you guys just provided, what are some of the tips that both you guys would give to take advantage of these new changes in privacy and insurance?
Well, I think if you get out ahead of the game, like if you show that you're proactive in your cyber defense, a company like New Shield or others like that you can install and put the software into your company ahead of time so that when you go for insurance, the underwriter realizes that you're cognizant of what needs to be done, you're a professional. You've put in these barriers that are going to prevent or certainly reduce the number of cyber attacks that you're going to suffer and hopefully eliminate the ransomware. So I would say that, yeah, just don't wait for them to come back. And it's going to be like, well, I think Alan mentioned, or I think the question was, is there going to be government regulation around it? When, in my humble opinion, I obviously don't know, but I would say yes, that one day that it's going to be mandatory to have cyber insurance. It's going to be like automobile insurance. You can't go out there and drive without insurance. Too many businesses are losing their livelihood because of cyber attacks. Joe Biden said he went on the record to say this has to stop. We can't keep paying out ransomware. And now our friend Mr. Putin is going to attack businesses in countries that are supporting the Ukraine to wreak havoc on them. He can't use weapons against us, but he can use cyber attacks. So in addition to the bad guys that are out there trying to get money from you, you've got Russia trying to just disrupt the whole economy by cyber attacks. So you've got to get out ahead of it, get a good MSP, make sure that you've done everything you can to mitigate your losses. Was it, no, not, it wasn't Comey, it was Mueller. Robert Mueller, when he was head of the FBI, said there's only two companies out there. There's those that have been hacked and those that are going to be hacked. So it's just something that we have to live with it, but we can take steps to mitigate it and make sure that you put in the proper precautions.
And if you do keep paying the ransom, it's probably just going to encourage people to keep doing it more and more.
Well, yeah. I mean, you won't get your data back. That's one thing, and you can't live without the crown jewels, as we call it. And if you do, if they do, if you don't pay it, then they expose it to the world that you've been hacked, and your customers are going to scream bloody murder and not want to do business with you, knowing they've been hacked. And that their personal information is out there on the web for everyone to see. So you're really caught between a rock and a hard place. You don't want to pay it, but you've got to get your data back. And another stat is like really disturbing is that even if you do pay it, there's about, I think, 20% never get their data back anyway. They just don't. They have to send you a key to install on your hard drive, and it doesn't work, or they don't send it. And they come back for more money. So, and like I said, once you've been hacked, they'll probably do it again because they figure they've got a mark. So, get your insurance company involved right from the beginning, and let them handle it.
Alan, can I get 2 cents from you before we move on to audience questions?
Sure. So my advice would really be strategic when you're talking to the business side. When you're saying things like, we should have insurance for this, hey, if you look at the privacy legislation, if you have stats, like Ken has mentioned, those kind of stats can be a great story. That's the way to get your message across. That's the way to get results. Leverage that stuff, the privacy legislation, the insurance companies that are going to say you must do X, Y, and Z to get insurance. Those are definitely your friend. Make use of them.
Thank you so much. I'm going to open this up to the audience for any questions. I see a few hands here. I'll start with you.
I can speak up. As the companies come in and say, okay, you're going to have to do more as a company in terms of protecting your stuff, are the insurers or the underwriters referring to a common set of standards? Because particularly if rates are going up, I'm going to want to look between companies, but I would like it if there was a common standard for the type of protection they were referring to, so I don't discover I've done something for one company and my rates go up and I go to a different insurer and they say, we don't care what you needed to go to those guys. You need something different for us.
Well, that's possible because a lot of companies are partnering up with insurance companies to say, hey, use our software for your clients, and they're happy with it. So they've vetted out the software. They think it'll help them underwrite it and prevent losses. So I would let them come to you and say, install this, you'll get insurance. You'll probably get a break. There's probably two-tiered pricing. There's going to be a price for people who don't install it and people who do install it. So it might pay for itself over time anyway. But there's not one standard software that everyone uses.
So what I would say too, just to clarify on the other side, so if you talk about standards like NIST, CIS, that kind of stuff, this is kind of early days. So if you think of like charging cables, for instance, on phones, they're working on standardizing that. So I think they'll get to that. We're seeing definitely discrepancies, differences in terms of what companies are asking for. To Ken's point, some companies are asking one question, others are saying they've got a whole 20 pages you got to answer to get insurance. So it has not standardized. It's probably working towards that, though.
Yes, sir.
Which is the experience I'm having now, because I got the 20 pages.
Yeah.
And the 20 pages generated, that's just the questions. Now you have to give the answers. But my question to you then is, because these questionnaires are relatively new, and you mentioned that with smaller companies or organizations in which 60%, if they are breached, won't survive, but they're probably not in a position to basically say, yeah, we got that through 20 pages of questions. How stringent are those questions to actually getting insurance? In other words, if I'm saying, yeah, our organization's still rather immature, but here's the plan that over the next, and it's going to be years, because if it's 20 pages, that's a lot of work to do
Yeah.
to get there.
No, I agree with you 100%. Like, and that's why the companies with the one question is the largest, because people tend to take the path of least resistance, right? If I've got to fill out a 20-page application to get insurance from this company and one question for this company, I'm going here, right? So, but you're going to see more and more companies require that, and it's usually a questionnaire that requires the IT person involved, right? It's not just the principal who has to fill it out. The IT guy needs to be involved. Yeah, and again, I don't know who your broker is, but they probably represent several companies that can have a different approach to it. But
And my experience as a broker gives you one set of questions,
yeah,
but then when you go to the underlying insurance company, they say, oh, those are
I'm sorry, I'm
here's a
gonna have to cut you off, but we'll be hanging out here, and you can come to us with questions.
yeah,
Sorry about that.
yeah. We only have so much.
Thank you so
Sorry,
much.
one quick thing. Don't just care about getting the insurance, also the claims. Because if you answer something and get the insurance, then try and claim, and it's proved to be false, that's an issue.